Today we're going to replace the power button flex cable on an iPhone 6. This part includes the rear camera's flash module and the microphone used for recording video. If possible, you may want to order the one that already has a metal bar attached to the lock button, as this will make the installation much easier. You can find links to the replacement part and the tools used for this repair by clicking on the card at the top right corner of the screen or by reading the video description. We're going to start with the display removed and the battery disconnected. If you aren't familiar with iPhone 6 screen replacement, check out this video for a full screen replacement tutorial. There are shortcuts in the video description in case you want to jump ahead or need to come back and find details for any of the steps. If you take a look at the replacement part and just kind of line it up here inside the phone, you will see that the cable that we need to plug in goes right underneath this metal panel. However, the rest of the flex cable goes underneath the battery and the logic board, which means that we're going to have to remove both of those in order to install the replacement part. So to get to that is going to take a little effort, and we will also need to be very organized because there's tons of stuff on the inside of the phone here. First thing I will do is disconnect the charging port cable, the antenna wire down here at the bottom, the main rear facing camera, and then of course we do need to take the SIM card tray out of the phone because it runs through the housing and into the logic board, and it will prevent the board from being removed if you don't take this out. So if you haven't already done so, go ahead and do that. I will unplug the cables first. So again, starting with the main camera right here, charging port cable over on this end. And the last one I'm going to get is this antenna wire. Yours may look slightly different because this might have a piece of foam padding on top of it. And you want to be really careful with disconnecting these because if you pull the wire from here, you can actually disconnect it from that metal piece. So it's not a real strong, it's probably one of the more sensitive parts here that you have to worry about. I find that a pick like this, you can probably use a pair of tweezers to carefully get under the wire, make sure you're underneath the metal part, and then just lift. And you might have to hold the board down, and that should disconnect, and then we can just kind of move it out of the way because we don't want it to get snagged when you pull the board out. We're going to have lots of screws to take out from here, including a standoff screw here. So I find that these are best removed with the special driver that is made specifically for them. This is the easiest way to get this screw out. If you don't happen to have one, you can use a small slotted driver to take this out, but if you have access to this, it is far easier because it's actually made for this screw. So I'm going to start with that one. And again, be very organized. There are tons of screws here and you do not want to get them mixed up. So if you have to, you can label or draw a diagram, whatever it takes, but make sure that you do not get these mixed up. Also, you'll notice I'm going to leave this screw for the last one. And I do that because I like to have something securing the board that is kind of central rather than leaving, let's say, these screws to the last, because there's always a possibility of placing some stress on the logic board if you're lifting out one side and you happen to forget one of the outer screws. So we'll come back to that one later. Let's go ahead and remove this Phillips screw next to the camera. Again, you can see how small these are. They're just ridiculous, but they must be removed. Now we can take out the two screws that hold this panel down. Note that they are very different in length. Hard to do that left-handed. I want this to be visible, but it's tricky to reach around the camera. All right, we can go ahead and take this panel out. It would be nice if we could just plug in our part and connect it now, but of course, cables are buried at this point. Now you can disconnect it, it's not a big deal. And in fact, if you want to make sure that your part is working, you can at this point connect the cable, and if you maneuver properly, you should be able to reconnect your display and your battery and check this power button and make sure that it's working. I'm going to assume that this one is, because it's kind of a headache to do that, and I'm willing to take the chance on this, but if you wanted to, you could test your part at this point. I'm going to reposition this to make things easier, and we might even be able to come in closer. So I'm going to go ahead and start with these two at the top. Looks like I need to magnetize. Things aren't sticking the way I would like them to. And this little plastic piece will need to come off. And be very careful here. I'm going to do the reassembly so you can see these going back in, but if you mix these screws up, it's going to be tricky to tell what's what, and you don't want to make that mistake, but it does get slightly complicated here. I think we have one more that needs to come out still. Yeah, it's going to be that one before this little panel comes off. So remember, this panel has a total of 5 screws that will go in after you place this plastic piece inside. So this is going to be, even though you've got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it looks like 6 holes, but there's only really 5 here that we're going to use for those screws. So I would set all the stuff that we just took off in one pile so you know where it goes. And there's another cable that we'll have to disconnect here from the top in order to remove the logic board. Here we only need to remove the screw on the left. We can leave the other one attached. So I'm going to go ahead and move back down here and take out the screw I was saving. Not this one, that's for the SIM card ejector. We want this one right here. And once we get this screw out, we can remove the board from the housing. Just be careful to make sure that you're not snagged on any of the cables, and then you can slide the board out from the top end going towards the bottom. The next thing will be the battery. Then we'll have a couple screws in here. If you haven't already seen the battery removal video, you will probably want to check it out, because I have a feeling I may break this, but we'll give it a shot anyway. So we've got a couple tabs down here that are on the bottom end of the battery, and we want to get underneath all this gooey stuff that's beneath them. Hopefully I'll get it right this time. The 6s aren't too bad. It's the 6S that's kind of a pain. So you might find this easier if the charging port's removed, but otherwise, if you just take these and very slowly pull them out, very slowly, and I'm gonna, yeah, it feels like it's sticking. When they snap, it's very disappointing, because then you have to go in and pry the battery. Okay, so this one's cooperating. Okay, so that one came out in one piece. I want to do the same thing with this one, and then the battery will come out very easily. Okay, I think I got the whole thing. Find out right now. Nope, I did not get the entire piece of adhesive. I got the majority of it, but I have a little left behind. So I want to pry under the battery, and I'm kind of glad that happened, because I wanted you to see that when you're taking this out, of course, since we're replacing this cable, we don't have to worry too much about damaging it. But normally when you pry the battery, you only want to pry in this area. Well, let me just get this back over here. I would only pry between here and here. That way you don't damage anything that's under the battery. So a credit card or room key works well in this situation. It's just the right size to go between those areas that I pointed out. And then you should be able to kind of get underneath the battery. Be careful, because you don't want to bend the housing. If you're working with an iPhone 6 or 6 Plus, they are very prone to being bent. So you don't want too much force being applied there. It should just take your time, pull it nice and easy, and then hopefully you don't bend up your housing. We'll go ahead and take this out for now. We'll just replace that. I've also repositioned the phone one more time because we're just going to be working up in this area for the moment. And had I thought ahead, yes, we do need to remove the rear-facing camera because, of course, we are replacing the flash. And can we get under here? Yeah, it's going to be a little tricky to work under that cable, so we're definitely going to have to take this out. So we've got one screw here. That does not seem to stick to my screwdriver. So I'm going to bring in some tweezers and give it a little help. And I want to say there may be something else here that we're going to be working around. Take a look at this. You see this little piece right here? You want to make sure that we get that back in exactly the way that we found it. So I'm going to show you, it kind of slides in like this. It goes right in that way, and that is the correct orientation. So when you go to put that back together, make sure you have the black side going underneath the plastic tab on the camera. And if I remember correctly, we've got a cable, we've got a clip here that goes across the back, which means there has to be another screw probably buried underneath this tape. Doesn't that figure? So let's peel this tape just a hair, and you'll see there's the other side of the clip, and there's the screw that needs to come out. All right, so there's that. So I just ran out of storage and got through a lot of this repair and had to back up to do it over again. So you're going to notice that this adhesive comes off easier than it probably will for you. Do be prepared for that. Of course, if you're replacing this, I'm assuming that you have a problem with the cable, so it's not a big deal if you damage it, but I'm going to get this off in one piece without damaging any of it. And after we've got the clip removed from the back side of the camera, what we're going to do is just very carefully kind of lift this out. You see that that piece tucked underneath that tape or whatever this stuff is here. So that's why we had that screw that was hidden from us. And from here, if you just work out the camera, it should come out of the housing without too much difficulty. You can just kind of lift that straight up. Well, if I can get a hold of it. And there's your camera. So I will probably make a separate video for replacing the camera so that people can find it. Underneath here, you'll have another piece that needs to come out, and there's a small screw here, and then this is going to tuck underneath this black part. So after you take this screw out, you're going to pretty much slide this little panel downwards and make sure you keep track of this stuff. So this goes like this and just kind of slides out from underneath there. So we want to make sure that we tuck that in when we put it back together. From here, I would proceed to remove the screws from the power button. So we're going to have one here and one here. And as I mentioned, you can see this has already kind of been peeled up because I had to take it out once and put it back together so that I can show you the process. But what we'll do is just kind of pull this away from the side, and you'll notice that we don't have to worry too much about the button because it's actually held together with a rubber gasket sort of mechanism there. It's designed to keep moisture out of the phone, I assume. And what we want to do is get underneath this cable. And then of course we'll have our flash that's sort of lodged up here in the housing, so you might have to work to kind of pull that out. And then we'll have our microphone, which is going to be another tricky part. So first thing we want to do is just kind of slide, peel this away. Like I said, yours will be slightly more sticky than mine, but you can usually use a flat tool to kind of get underneath and just free it from the adhesive that's holding it inside the frame. And here you can see I've done that once before, and I got all the way to this point, and that microphone definitely has an adhesive behind it. So get something underneath here that we can kind of pull that without destroying it. That's the idea. And you'll see that there is in fact some sticky stuff that kind of goes around. Again, probably to seal out moisture and also to make sure that the sound goes into the right area. So there's our part completely removed from the phone. Now, if you got lucky, you bought one just like this, and you can proceed to install it back into the phone. However, if you got one that looks like this, you're going to have to transfer this metal piece over to here. So we're going to do that right now so that you can see how that works. And it's somewhat straightforward. You can see this thing just kind of wraps around. So you can just remember the position this is going to end up in. We want it to look like this with the power button folded over this direction. And this is the point where I probably should turn off the fixed focus because I'm going to be moving things around here. So let's come back in just a second. All right, so now you'll have to live with some refocusing, but I think it will make the instructional more clear. So we're just going to kind of peel this off. Again, I'm doing this carefully because mine is functional and I do not wish to destroy it. This is a perfectly good working home button that I'm using for demonstration purposes, and it's also from a phone that's all OEM for the most part. So anyways, I'm just kind of peel behind that, whatever works. Okay, and we will then get underneath here. Separate this, if you can, from the metal piece. Remember, there's a bottom end and a top end. And getting underneath this cable is not easy. I need something thinner. So I've got my dulled razor blade. This is not sharp. I find that cuts down on the occurrence of accidentally damaging components. That's really stuck on there. Getting underneath here without cutting into it is the object. Okay, so we can free that just like so. This is what needs to go onto our replacement part, which will have some adhesive. However, I usually find that this adhesive is not very good. That has been my experience. But you will see there are some pegs. Hopefully I'm getting close enough here. There are some pegs here that are going to line up. This is going to sit like this, wrap it around the back, and there you have it. Now before you do that, of course, we want to take off this small piece of adhesive, and that's what's going to hold it in place. So you have to peel this back, and you want to make sure that you have everything lined up first, lined up straight the first time you stick it down. Well, that's going to be fun, isn't it? That is the tricky part about these replacement pieces. Getting plastic to peel away. Always a fun task. There we go. So that's some pretty sticky stuff, which is good news. That's what we want. Like so. So I would say make sure you put this in first. Okay, make sure you have this centered. Everything lines up. Again, we have that peg. Keep it straight and then wrap it around the back. They should put some adhesive here. Would have been nice. Wrap this around the back. Yeah, easier said than done. You can kind of see from the old adhesive where this stuff was supposed to sit. And then we'll kind of give it a bend right here because it's going to go up. And I would get this inside of the housing underneath the screws as soon as possible because that is going to want to pull away. You see how it's popping up here? Probably should add some adhesive underneath here, but I think I'll be able to get it into position If not, you can always do that. We'll make sure that it's clicking. You know, I may stick this thing down after all because it does not want to stay. So I'm going to add some more adhesive on the inside right there just to hold it in place. It shouldn't matter too much what you use as long as it doesn't cover the hole down here. So I'm going to put a small strip right here and just cut it short of the spot where the peg goes through. That's my goal. I need a slightly more precise pair of scissors, wouldn't hurt. Let's see if we can get that just a hair shorter. All right, so that should hold it in place. Yeah, any type of adhesive that's not very thick, you can use the red tape. I assume I'm using the black. There's the 300 LSE 3M stuff that works well enough. Peel that off, and we should be ready to set this down again. And there you feel you can feel it pop right into place. And now this thing should stay while we get the screws in. That's mainly what we want to accomplish. And I would go ahead and peel off at least this first piece. Oh, I guess it's going to be the whole thing, isn't it? So we're going to go ahead and commit at this point. Not much choice in the matter, so make sure you got this about. Oh, you're going to do that to me, aren't you? Okay, tell you what, we'll come back to this. After I remove that adhesive, I'm going to go ahead and uncover the flash and the microphone because we need to make sure that everything lines up before this thing sticks down. So we can go ahead and get flash into the housing. And we've still got one more piece of adhesive that needs to come off here. Wow, they really did a good job making sure this is going to stay where it needs to be. So we can go ahead and stick down the mic, make sure the flash is installed in the right spot. Then we'll come back to this little guy here, which has been so much fun. And it looks like the adhesive that I used stuck on the other actually stayed on the cable. Now I have dogs barking in the background. Okay, so let's peel this back so we have some room to work with. And when you get this thing centered, you'll be able to tell. There's only one spot where it fits. Flip this over. You're not going to stay for me, are you? This is why I don't love doing these. Okay, so hopefully you'll be able to get that situated, feel that it's clicking, and then get your screws back in as soon as possible. Of course, someone's texting me. Get these screws started. And of course, make sure that your button's clicking, because if it isn't, then you have a problem. And the problem could be over tightening these screws. It's an odd thing. It's clicking now, but if I tighten this all the way down, it does not click, which doesn't make sense unless this bar got bent somehow. But in any case, you do want to make sure that you can click the button. All right, so now we'll put it all back together. This is all going to be pretty much the reverse of the disassembly, but I'm going to run through it so that in case you forgot where anything went, hopefully you'll find this helpful. So remember, this slides underneath that little black tab, and that's going to help keep the flash right up against the housing. And we have a tiny screw that goes in. You can put the first screw in down here at the bottom. Get this thing to stay in place. These screws are tiny. And now make sure you have this straight before you tighten it down too much. Otherwise that top hole isn't going to line up. I think we're okay right there. Now we can move on to the camera, which remember is going to sit right inside here. Make sure that sits down flush so that it's nice and flat. And then we have our panel that's going to kind of tuck underneath the edge there, because remember that little screw is going to be behind the tape. Now if you remember this piece here, kind of slides in under the plastic there. I'll get this thing out of the way. Hopefully you can see that the silver end is towards me and the black end goes up underneath the plastic tab for the camera's retaining panel. Right, so it's going to sit just like that. And the logic board will kind of tuck underneath there when we install it. So now we can go ahead and put that tiny screw up here underneath this tape. Just going to peel that back slightly so you can get to it if you need to. Just a real strange place to put such a flimsy piece of tape. And that was covering the screw there before. It's not quite going to make it now because it's kind of sticking to itself. If you're concerned, you could add some cap on there. I wouldn't really worry about that too much. I don't think they needed to cover that screw for anything. At this point, we can install the battery if we like. And I'm going to show you, let's see, I'm going to show you this OEM sticker that you can buy for the battery. Easy to install if you want it to be like the original. Remember, you don't need this. You can put whatever type of adhesive works for you. But this way, we'll have it pretty close to the way it was when it was originally inside the phone. It just kind of wraps around like that. And then we'll have this stuff here, which if I remember, we'll just leave it like that. This is probably for 5S, but it will work. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and peel off this stuff on the back. And then we can set it right in just like this. That way this tab is really easy to get to if we ever need to remove the battery again. And let's make sure we're not on top of anything. Set that in. And there you go. Now we will go ahead and put this stuff back together. When you go to put your logic board back in, make sure that your charging port cable, your antenna wire, battery cable are all out of the way so that they don't get trapped underneath. You're also going to have to maneuver under the main camera flex cable, this little metal tab here, this black plastic piece here, and then of course the two cables that are right at the top end of the battery. So this is the tricky part for some people. Remember, we've got this black tab and this corner metal piece we're working with first of all. So after we kind of get that underneath here, you also have to make sure you're going in under this one. And then as you can see, I'm already trapping these cables at the top, and this is a pretty common error that people make if they haven't done many logic board replacements is you miss one little thing like that and you're going to lose functionality. In the worst case scenario, you may damage something if you smash it. So make sure you're underneath the black plastic tab, the metal piece, these two cables, and then you see my antenna wire managed to get underneath there. So we want that out of the way, battery cable and flex cable. All right, now from here, I usually put in this one screw that I pointed out earlier so that we can keep the board stable. It won't pop back out or move around while we're working on it. That will hold the logic board in place. I'm going to turn it around here and see if I can zoom in. Why can't I zoom in while I'm recording? There we go. I knew there was a way to do it. It's going to be a little tricky for me to work with my screwdriver this close to the camera, but we'll see what we can do. All right, now this screw and this screw can go in immediately. You don't have to wait. And then if you need to do some detective work to figure it out, you can always eliminate the screw that's going to be covered by this just by putting it there. So you can see this part, that particular screw can go in right now. It's not common with any of the other parts, only the logic board. And I would go ahead and plug in these cables. They should line up with no problems whatsoever. Now what we're going to do is put this plastic piece back on, and then we will put this screw in. As you can see, a lot of these screws are shared with, well, they're common for the logic board and this little plastic assembly. So we'll get these two. I'll try not to hit the camera with my hand. All right, then we've got two small ones over here. And now we've got this metal tab that goes over the top just like that. All right, from here, we can go ahead and plug in. I would probably do the antenna wire first. You can plug in the rear-facing camera at any point, but this is easiest in my experience if you connect the antenna wire first before the charging port, and then of course we'll leave the battery for the very last after we have the display installed. If that doesn't feel like it wants to push in, don't force it. This is a very soft metal, so if you smash it, you can definitely damage your antenna connector. And from here, we've got a standoff screw, if you remember, that goes here. And then there's a small screw right above it. So I'm going to get all the Phillips that we can right away. Or I guess I was off camera there. Okay, so we've got one screw. I'll try to get my hand out of the way here. Got one screw that goes here. Got a very small screw that goes up here. It's the other part of this metal piece. All right, and from here, we can go ahead and connect our display. Oh, and of course, don't forget, you got your charging port. And from here, you can go ahead and put your screen back on. If you found the video helpful, like it, share it, check out my channel for more tutorials and product reviews, and most of all, remember to hit the subscribe button. Feel free to leave your feedback in the comments section, and thanks for watching.